In this video, I'm going to talk about why metronomes help people improve their aim, and also why they don't. They have pros and cons. I've touched over this in the past, over 6 months ago, and I don't really think I did a very good job, so I'm going to try and explain it better today. For reference, I'm an aim coach, worked with multiple pro Valorant players, top 500 players in a variety of FPS games, and many more. I've occasionally brought metronomes into my coaching sessions as well. A metronome is a simple, repetitive beeping sound. Metronome-based training is very simple. You go into a scenario and try to kill one target per beep, clicking on the beep. As a result of this, metronomes are really most popular in static clicking as you can time your clicks to the beep. It is possible to use metronomes in dynamic clicking, though this may feel off in most scenarios, as factors like target viability and directional changes make timed clicks feel pretty impossible. If I'm playing passive, I get to the bot and I have to hold it for another few milliseconds before the beep, it could move away from my crosshair. That doesn't mean you can't use a metronome in dynamic clicking, just keep these factors in mind when you're deciding whether or not you want to. In simple static clicking scenarios, when you use a metronome, you just need to flick and click to the beat. No worries about where the target's going. To start using a metronome, I usually start with very easy beats per minute. This allows you to get down the feeling of timing clicks so that it isn't overwhelming at first. Having to push pace while also learning to just click to a beat can be kinda hard. So start with a pace that's like half, a third, a quarter of your high score, and then usually after one run, you're ready to increase difficulty drastically. So to do this, just increase the beats per minute on the metronome. Continue to try and time your clicks to this beat even if you can't hit the target. Try to keep adding difficulty until your accuracy is between 60 and 80%. This allows you to make some errors and push to an uncomfortable pace while not losing track of what you're doing and just not being able to focus on your errors anymore. The most common problem I see with people who are new to using metronomes, other than forgetting to click subscribe, is not keeping pace. People will become uncomfortable to flick and choose to simply skip beats instead of keeping pace. Obviously, you don't have to have exactly 200 clicks for a 200 beats per minute metronome, but you want to be close enough that it's within the margin of error. If you start to be off by 10, 15, 20 beats per minute, then you're defeating the purpose of a metronome. But to understand why, we actually have to look into what that purpose is. Metronomes do a lot of things. At the surface level, the main focus is to help you push pace. You won't be able to settle into a pace if you're constantly told to click. In most static clicking scenarios, targets will have radically different distances from each other. This means that they will normally take longer to go between some targets than others. When making small micro adjustments, you will be able to get 3 targets very quickly. When making a longer flick, it will take longer. A lot of people struggle to understand how in these scenarios a constant beeping sound can help you push pace, and this kinda defeats the purpose of a metronome. The metronome will force these long flicks to be uncomfortably fast. You will make errors, and that's fine. You will mess up. That's what you want. You want to feel like you have to flick fast, and then you want to feel the error. Rarely do you have to move that fast when you're not aping and just not focusing on what's going on. However, it's also true that if one target is really close to another and then a third target's 50 degrees away from the other two, then it can kind of feel hard to balance a metronome in a way that you're pushing speed and also able to focus on your errors. If I'm not going insanely slow on the small close together targets, then when I go to the far away target, I will have to go so fast I won't even be able to focus. For that reason, I would say that for some people in some scenarios, metronomes are just unviable. I'd also say that you could probably rank most static scenarios by their metronome viability. For example, a scenario like raw mouse control clicking 3 extra small is pretty viable. The target spacing is relatively even, and you can flick between targets very quickly. I use this scenario a lot when people I'm coaching are very slow with micro adjustments. A scenario like wide wall 10 targets vibrate might be less metronome viable than wide wall 3 targets, as the targets are clustered more frequently when there's 10 targets. You can manipulate metronome viability by choosing to ignore clusters and always going for faraway targets. My friend StarkLN and I are currently considering making a project where bots will spawn at an equal distance apart, and this allows for metronomes to be completely viable. However, this theoretically perfect metronome scenario may end up losing some value. As I said above, having slight variable distance causes some shots to be more difficult while others are easier, making the scenario have some more challenge, while the metronome doesn't feel too impossible and like you're constantly messing up. Finding a balance between which scenarios feel good with a metronome and which don't, and how often you should use the metronome to feel uncomfortable, and how often you should play a scenario normally to practice variable speed is important for improvement. If you're someone who goes very slow, doesn't push yourself, doesn't even really flick in static scenarios, and kind of just goes very smoothly, you may want to use a metronome a lot. If you tend to already push speed pretty effectively and you want to kind of focus on getting more accurate, getting better at variable speed, a metronome probably wouldn't be as useful. One important thing to keep in mind is something I saw on a podcast about 6 months ago. In the 20th episode of his podcast, Dr. Andrew Huberman, a professor of neurobiology at Stanford, talks about how putting your focus on a metronome can increase the rates you learn a skill even more than putting your focus on something else. Not only does this have its benefit in itself, but it also kind of led me to realize that metronomes help me personally boost my focus. So even if you don't think you're the best person to be using a metronome, I'd still give it a try and just see what other benefits it can give you. Overall, just try it in a bunch of different scenarios and see how it works out for you. Try taking different approaches, different beats per minute. Use it a few different days and just see how you feel. Metronomes are very controversial in the AIM community, and there is reason behind that. Even scripting this, I went kind of back and forth on how useful they are, so I decided to structure this video as more of a here's the information than this is an argument. I definitely think metronomes get way more hate than they deserve, though I also don't think they're the word of God. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more AIM training content.